Chapter 1. The Oxygen Bomb Ride. The metallic wail tore through the skyline of the city down a thick, purple-black vine, as robust as an ancient giant python, spiraled upwards, entwining the glass curtain wall of the Hoa Corporation headquarters. With every movement of its greedy suckers, it left spiderweb-like cracks on the reinforced alloy framework, emitting a sound that made one's teeth ache. The high-purity reinforced glass, under the strangulation of the vine, shattered inch by inch like fragile candy, raining down from 300 meters into the neon-lit streets. Exploding into blossoms of death, the air was filled with a pungent mixture of rust and ozone, the unique deathly scent of the silica devouring vine. Alert! A large-scale outbreak of silica devouring vines has occurred in District D7 of the West City. Non-combat personnel, please immediately enter the nearest shelter. The cold electronic synthetic voice looped through the jarring alarm gaps, carried by the air currents stirred by the vines, fragmenting into the open doors of St. Venus Church. Inside the church, the wedding march still flowed through the organ, but it sounded like the absurd background music of an ill-timed farce. Beneath the massive dome, a near-frozen panic enveloped the guests. Those tycoons who usually wielded power in the news, and the well-dressed socialites, now had their carefully maintained masks shatter, leaving only primal fear. Whispers coalesced into a stifling buzz, eyes no longer focused on the newlyweds at the altar, but frequently glancing in terror at the apocalyptic scene outside. Damn it, wasn't the outer defense matrix supposed to hold until the wedding was over? A middle-aged man with slicked-back hair, Mr. Zhao from the board of the Hoa Corporation, cursed under his breath, nervously tapping on the diamond-embedded screen of his watch, trying to contact his private security team. The expensive jade respirator around his neck flashed a foreboding red light, an alarm indicating a sharp rise in external oxygen levels. The neural bridge signal is being interfered with. Have those Rust Belt peasants lost their minds? The elegantly dressed lady beside him trembled in voice, instinctively clutching her limited edition handbag as if it were a last resort. Panic spread like an invisible plague, mingling with the air heavy with expensive perfume and the scent of desperate sweat. Only at the altar did one figure stand out with an incongruous calmness, or rather, an emptiness that seemed to have been drained. Hui, the 19-year-old boy, clad in a perfectly tailored but evidently oversized white suit, resembled a weak plant forcibly transplanted into a gilded cage. He slightly lowered his head, his messy black hair covering his forehead, revealing only a pale neck and thin lips pressed into a straight line. He was the male lead of this grand marriage, the heir of the mysterious E family, and after today, a pawn branded with the Hoa family son-in-law mark. The surrounding clamor and the disaster outside seemed to be blocked by an invisible barrier. He merely stared at the new, uncomfortable leather shoes on his feet, as if the secrets of the universe were hidden there. Only when he occasionally glanced up at his bride did a fleeting ripple of emotion flicker in the depths of his deep-set eyes, quickly drowned by a deeper silence. His bride, Hui Yuyan, the sole heir of the Hoa Corporation, now appeared like a frozen jade sculpture. She wore a wedding dress woven from top-tier nanomaterials and rare biological silk, shimmering with colors that outlined breathtaking curves. However, her stunningly beautiful face bore no expression, as if covered by eternal frost. Her long lashes hung low, concealing all emotions beneath, leaving only a cold indifference that kept others at bay. Around her delicate neck, an ancient-style silver necklace flickered in and out of visibility under the church's shifting light, its pendant a deep blue gemstone that seemed capable of swallowing light. Her hands were elegantly crossed over her abdomen, perfect in posture, yet exuding a chilling aloofness. It was as if this silent boy, soon to be her husband, and the rampaging silica devouring vines outside were merely unpleasant background noise she had to confront. Mr. Hui, the Hoa family's head butler, an elderly man with meticulously styled hair and a sharply tailored tailcoat, spoke through a miniature amplifier, his voice tinged with barely perceptible urgency and forced calm. Please raise your esteemed right hand and place it on Miss Hui Yuyan's hand to complete the sacred oath. His gaze was sharp as an eagle, locked tightly on Hui, the invisible pressure spreading with an undeniable commanding presence. Huey's body stiffened imperceptibly for a moment. The surrounding air seemed to thicken and weigh down, mingling with the rust-like odor of the silica devouring vines. The panic sweat of the guests, and a faint yet distinctly chilling fragrance emanating from his bride beside him. He slowly raised his right hand, as if fighting against some invisible massive resistance. The fabric of his suit brushed against his skin, making a faint rustling sound that stood out sharply in the now silent altar. That hand was long and slender, yet devoid of strength, revealing the youthful awkwardness of a B-O-Y-I-T hovered in the air, fingertips trembling slightly, betraying the turmoil within. Below, Ian's hands lay stacked together, pale to the point of translucence. They were close enough to touch, yet seemed separated by a vast ocean of stars. Just as Huey's fingertips were about to make contact with that icy skin. Boom! A terrifying explosion, far surpassing all previous noises, roared like an angry bellow from deep within the earth, violently shaking the entire church. The cloud-patterned stone floor beneath their feet instantly buckled and shattered. The massive crystal chandelier swung wildly, dazzling light and shadow leaping chaotically across the walls and terrified faces. The scream instantly tore apart all facades of calm. It did not come from outside. The source of the explosion was unmistakably the exterior wall of the Hua family's exclusive oxygen extraction factory, adjacent to the garden, at the side and rear of the church. A massive shockwave, mingling blinding white light with deep purple toxic gas, crashed through the stained glass windows, depicting angel murals as if it were the breath of a hellish dragon. The searing airwave carried with it lethal debris and thick smoke, sweeping towards the altar like a tsunami. "Protect the lady!" The butler's shrill scream was drowned out by the tremendous roar and countless terrified screams. Time seemed to stretch and distort. Hui, almost instinctively, lunged forward at the moment the destructive shockwave was about to engulf Huiyuan. He grabbed her cold wrist with all his might and pulled her behind him. The action was clumsy, yet resolute, disregarding everything. Ugh! A muffled grunt. Huey's back was fully exposed to the shockwave and flying debris. A shard of reinforced glass, edged as sharp as a knife, crashed into the area just below his left shoulder blade with tremendous force. Blood gushed out instantly, blooming into a glaring and hideous red flower on his pristine suit. The immense impact sent him staggering, nearly causing him to fall with Huiyuan. The pain felt like a red-hot iron branding itself instantly on the nerve endings. Huey's vision darkened, a sweet metallic taste surging in his throat. However, more intense and foreign than this physiological pain was something abruptly exploding from deep within his being. It did not come from the wound. It originated from the marrow, from the soul, from that core part of his body, long sealed by countless family taboos since he could remember. An indescribable torrent of heat erupted, as if the magma that had slept for eons suddenly awakened, bursting forth through the wound in his shoulder. It violently shattered some invisible shackles, instantly flowing through his limbs and bones. Wherever it passed, every cell screamed in agony, yet greedily devoured this frenzied power amidst the screams, emitting crackling sounds. He felt his bones buzzing, his blood boiling, and his vision was instantaneously tinted with a bizarre, flowing golden red hue. A young and piercing cry pierced through the chaotic roar, stabbing into Huey's eardrum, torn by excruciating pain and the storm within his body. Less than 10 meters in front of them, a little girl about 5 or 6 years old, dressed in a pink lace dress, was lifted by the explosive shockwave and slammed heavily onto the ground littered with rubble and shards of glass. She curled up in terror, her small face streaked with tears and dust. Above her head, a purple-black silicon devouring vine, thick as a bowl and snapped off from the ceiling by the explosion, was hurtling down with a crushing force, accompanied by a piercing shriek that tore through the air, aimed directly at the small, helpless figure. The vine's grotesque suckers opened, glinting with a metallic cold light, like the fangs of death. Time seemed to freeze. The guests' screams, the butler's roars, the groans of the building, all sound vanished. In Huey's world, there was only that terrifying vine about to consume a life and the girl's desperate, tear-filled eyes. His body moved faster than his consciousness. The violent and unfamiliar scorching torrent that had just erupted within him felt like it had found a volcanic vent for release. No longer a chaotic surge, it was instantly dominated, compressed, and condensed by a will that stemmed from the depths of his soul, an almost instinctive drive. "Get away!" A hoarse roar erupted from Huey's tightly clenched teeth, filled with a ferocity he had never felt before and an undeniable authority. He forcefully shook off the hand that Yen had instinctively grabbed onto his armor hand was still cold. Like a completely enraged young beast, he disregarded the bleeding wound on his back and lunged towards the little girl. It wasn't running, it was more like a sudden catapult. His speed far exceeded the limits of his frail body. In a life-and-death moment, when the vine was less than half a foot from the girl's head, Huey's figure blocked the way. He had no weapon, no protection, only a pair of hands that had just risen, stained with his own blood. Those long, pale hands, now entwined with a visible flow of light golden energy, carried a resolute determination as they fiercely and accurately grasped the descending silicon devouring vine, like a red-hot branding iron pressed into cold butter. The terrifying sound of bones shattering that he had anticipated did not occur. The moment Huey's hands made contact with the vine's rough surface covered in suckers, the blood flowing from his palm merged instantly with the light golden energy erupting in a strange radiance. An invisible, unstoppable force burst forth from his fingertips. That terrifying vine, capable of crushing armored vehicles, emitted a spine-chilling, ear-piercing screech as it was forcefully torn apart by Huey's bare hands. Theta, the purple-black, resilient vine body, seemed to be cleaved open by an invisible blade. The tough fibers were rendered fragile in the face of the intertwined power of light gold and blood, instantly torn in half. A thick, foul-smelling dark green liquid, like a mix of rust and machine oil, gushed out violently like a high-pressure water gun, splattering Huey from head to toe. The viscous, cold liquid slid down his forehead and cheeks, dripping onto his pure white suit, mingling with his own blood, a shocking sight. The severed segments of the vine dangled helplessly, twitching like a severed poisonous snake. Silence. Absolute silence enveloped this small area. Even the distant explosions and the sounds of collapsing buildings seemed to be cut off. Everyone who witnessed this scene, Yen, protected by the butler and bodyguard director Zhao, who had just struggled to rise a few nearby guests, were all frozen in place as if under a spell, mouths slightly agape, eyes wide in disbelief, staring at the bloodied figure in front of the altar, that silent, introverted, and regarded by everyone as a waste, soft rice man, the Yi family's boy-in-law. He stood with his back to the crowd, slightly hunched, breathing heavily, his thin shoulders trembling from pain and overexertion. Behind him, the wounds caused by the glass shards bled more with each rise and fall of his breath, staining a larger area of his suit red. His face and hands were smeared with the vine's splattered viscous, disgusting liquid and blood, looking utterly disheveled. Yet beneath his feet lay the horrific silicon-devouring vine, torn in half and still twitching. Behind him stood the little girl, so frightened she had forgotten to cry, staring blankly at him. An indescribable, heavy pressure, as heavy as a mountain, radiated outward from him, silently spreading in all directions. It was not a deliberate release, but rather a natural emanation, like a sleeping giant revealing its claws for the first time, exuding an aura that made souls tremble. Yan's icy eyes showed the first signs of intense fluctuation. Shock, confusion, and a hint of something she herself had not yet noticed flashed quickly in the depths of her gaze. She instinctively raised her hand and tightly gripped the cold, dark blue gemstone pinned in her chest, her fingertips turning slightly white from the force. Hui slowly and extremely laboriously turned around. The viscous liquid dripped from his chin. He raised his hand, not to wipe the filth from his face, but with an expression of near bewilderment, he covered his violently rising chest. His heart pounded madly in his chest, each beat causing his eardrums to buzz. It was not merely due to the life-and-death struggle and excruciating pain he had just experienced. In his perception, deep within his chest, in some dimension of his soul, it felt as if a heavy, long-sealed door, sealed for billions of years, had been violently cracked open by that explosive force, creating a barely perceptible gap. A sense of existence so vast that it made his soul tremble was quietly spreading out from that gap, like a dark current from the depths of the sea, cold, ancient, and carrying an indifference that looked down upon all things. His fingers, stained with blood and slime, dug deeply into the fabric of his suit, the knuckles turning white from exertion. Cold sweat mixed with the foul liquid dripped down, falling into his wide-open eyes, bringing a sharp sting, yet failing to cover the sudden spark of golden light, filled with fear and confusion, igniting in his pupils. Something had awakened within his body. Chapter 2. The Contract Under the Crimson Moon. Thick smoke swirled in the ruins of the St. Venus Church, like dying gray serpents. The torn remnants of the silicon devouring vine lay scattered among the shards of stained glass. Dark green liquid mingling with Huey's blood, winding into eerie totems on the cloud-patterned stone floor. Bang! With a dull sound, Huey was roughly pressed against the wall of the makeshift confession room. The wound on his back made contact with the cold marble, causing him to black out momentarily. Two security personnel in black uniforms from the Ho family restrained his arms with such force that it felt like they were about to crush his bones. "Look at our esteemed groom." The voice of the Ho family head, Ho Tianqing, came from the shadows, hissing like a snake. The gift sent by the Yi family indeed holds surprises. Hui struggled to lift his head. Ho Tianqing, about in his 50s, with a well-maintained face that showed no signs of aging, except for his eagle-like eyes, which radiated chilling shrewdness and cruelty, sat in a gilded armchair that seemed to have been brought in from somewhere. His fingers rhythmically tapped on the jade respirator embedded in the armrest. Behind him, the butler was wiping his gold-rimmed glasses with a snow-white handkerchief, his gaze scanning Hui like a scanner. In the corner, Yuyan stood as still as a statue. Her wedding dress had been replaced with a high-necked black gown, making her skin appear even paler. The dark blue gemstone around her neck was clutched tightly in her palm, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. Her gaze was fixed on the blood-red moon outside the window, as if everything in the room had nothing to do with her. "Let him go." The three words were as cold as the wind sweeping across an ice field. The security personnel hesitated and looked at Hui Tianqing. The head of the family nodded slightly, and Hui was immediately released. Stumbling forward 2 steps before steadying himself, he instinctively reached for the wound on his chest, though it had been simply bandaged. Every breath still brought a tearing pain. "Do you know?" Hui Tianqing stood up, his shiny leather shoes crunching over the glass shards on the floor with a painful screech. "According to the original plan, you should be lying in the cultivation chamber of Hui Medical Center right now, filled with tubes." Becoming Yu Yan's brain bridge controller, he took a metallic box from the butler and opened it with a click. Inside was a row of syringes gleaming with a cold light, the liquid inside swaying slightly, displaying a strange blue-purple color. "But your performance is quite interesting." Hui Tianqing picked up one of the syringes, the needle tip glinting coldly in the moonlight, tearing apart the silicon vines with your bare hands. This ability was not mentioned in the Yi family's report. Huey's pupils suddenly constricted. He recognized that kind of agent neural bridging enhancer, a tool used by Hua to control the swarm network nodes. Those injected would become living signal towers, but the cost was the gradual disappearance of their autonomous consciousness. "Choose." Hui Tianqing handed the syringe to Hui. "Become Yu Yan's shackles," or he pointed to the still raging silicon vines outside the window, "become nourishment for those monsters." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Hui could hear his own rapid heartbeat and the faint sound of blood dripping from the wound on his back. His gaze crossed with Tianqing and landed on Yu Yan. The girl was still looking out the window, but Hui keenly noticed her fingers gripping the necklace trembled slightly. Just as Hui was about to speak, a piercing alarm suddenly echoed throughout the ruins of the church. "Warning. The Western District Defense Matrix has failed." Repeating, "The Western District Defense Matrix." The alarm abruptly stopped, replaced by a chilling sound of metal twisting. Following that, the entire western wall collapsed in a deafening explosion. Debris and dust poured down like a torrential rain. An alive figure leaped out from the smoke, landing steadily between Hui and Hui Tianqing. It was a woman in her early 20s, with neat silver short hair, a mechanical eyepiece over her right eye, and data streams rolling down the lens like a waterfall. She wore rusted metal armor, and at her waist hung a strangely shaped weaponized sword with a pulsating red magnetic core embedded in the hilt. "Mona." Hui Tianqing's voice wavered for the first time. "The mad dog of the Rust Belt Army actually dares to come here?" The silver-haired woman monogrinned, revealing a sharp canine tooth. "Old man, your oxygen extraction factory has turned into fireworks." She glanced at Hui, her mechanical eyepiece emitting beeping scanning sounds. "Is this the young master who can tear vines with his bare hands? He looks rather fragile." Hui Tianqing's expression darkened ominously. "Do you think you can do this alone?" Who said I was alone? Mona whistled that in an instant, dozens of fully armed warriors emerged from the ruins. They wore patchwork armor, their weapons marked with signs of manual modifications. But each of their eyes burned with the same intense fury. The most striking feature was the matching tattoos on their necks, a lung pattern entwined with iron chains, the emblem of the Rust Belt resistance. We've collected enough air taxes, Hua Tianxing. Mona drew her magnetic core sword, its blade humming with a rising red glow. Tonight, we will reclaim the air you've taken from us. A melee was about to erupt. Hui was pushed to the corner, watching helplessly as Mona's magnetic core sword clashed with his emerald respirator, sparks flying. The Rust Belt warriors surged in like a tide, engaging in combat with Hua's security personnel. Lasers and live ammunition intertwined to create a net of death, further tearing apart the already dilapidated church. A flying piece of debris grazed Huey's cheek, causing a sharp sting. He instinctively searched for Yu Yan, only to find that she had retreated into the shadows deep within the confessional room. Her lips moved slightly, as if murmuring something, and the gem on her necklace flickered with her whispers. Suddenly, an unusual feeling crawled up Huey's spine. He turned around sharply to see Hua Tianxing's butler silently approaching Yu Yan, holding a blue-purple syringe identical to the one before. His body acted before his mind could process it. The moment Hui lunged at the butler, the unhealed wound on his back burst open again, blood soaking through the bandages. He grabbed the butler's wrist, and they both fell heavily to the ground. The syringe slid far away, the liquid inside spilling onto the floor, corroding it and producing hissing bubbles. You ungrateful little beast. The butler's usually polite face twisted in anger as he choked Huey's neck. Do you think the Yi family sent you here for no reason? You are merely. The butler's curses were abruptly cut off. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at his chest where a blood-stained sword tip was protruding out. Mona pulled out her magnetic core sword, and the butler's body slumped to the ground like a rag. She wiped the blood off the sword and extended her hand to Hui. Can you still walk, young master? Hui struggled to get up, his first reaction to look at Yu Yan. The girl was still standing in place, but her gaze finally returned from the window, landing on Hui. In that moment, Hui seemed to see a ripple in the icy depths of her eyes. Take her. Mona suddenly shouted. She is the core node of Hua's swarm network. Almost simultaneously with Mona's call, Yu Yan's necklace erupted with blinding blue light. The entire church ruins began to shake violently, and the severed limbs of the silicon vines twisted as if summoned by some force. Run. Mona grabbed Huey's arm with one hand and reached for Yu Yan with the other. She is activating the defense protocol, but it was already too late. The first to suffer were 3 Rust Belt warriors close to Yu Yan. The silicon vines pierced their chests like lightning, lifting their bodies high, blood raining down. Mona's mechanical eyepiece emitted a sharp alarm, the data streams rolling frantically. Damn it, it's neural sync overload. She turned sharply to Hui. Can you use that power again? The one that tears the vines apart. Huey's chest heaved violently. He could feel that strange power within him stirring behind the crack that had been torn open. But accompanying it was an indescribable fear, as if once he fully released that power, there would be no turning back. I don't know how to control it. Then learn to control it. Mona shoved a metallic object into his hand. It was her magnetic core sword. Otherwise, we'll all die here. The hilt felt cold in his hand, but almost instantly became scorching hot. Hui was astonished to see that the magnetic core on the hilt was reacting to his blood, emitting a blue light similar to Yu Yan's necklace. Strangely, the wound on his back suddenly burned with pain, as if something was flowing through his blood toward his palm. Watch out! Amidst Mona's warning, a silicon vine as thick as a bucket came crashing down toward Huey's head. In a split second, Hui instinctively raised the magnetic core sword. The red and blue lights on the blade intertwined, forming a dazzling energy barrier. The silicon vine crashed against the barrier with a deafening explosion, but unbelievably, it was blocked. Nice. Mona whistled now. Counterattack. A scene suddenly flashed through Huey's mind. When he was 3 years old, his biological mother held his hand and drew strange symbols in the sand. That once blurred memory was now incredibly clear, and his arm seemed to have a will of its own as it swung the magnetic core sword along the remembered trajectory. A crescent-shaped energy wave howled out, and wherever it passed, the silicon vines snapped apart. Even more astonishingly, The cut ends of the severed vines began to rust, decaying at a visible speed. The church suddenly fell silent. Everyone's gaze was focused on Hui, including the usually expressionless Yu Yan. For the first time, a clear emotional fluctuation appeared in the girl's eyes: shock, confusion, and a hint of indescribable anticipation. Hua Tianqing's face turned extremely ugly. So that's it. The family has hidden that in your body. He couldn't finish his sentence. Mona suddenly raised her hand, and an electromagnetic pulse bomb struck Hua Tianqing's chest. The head of the family let out a muffled groan, and sparks flew from his emerald respirator as he staggered back a few steps, shielded by the arriving security personnel. Retreat! Mona shouted. The mission is accomplished. The soldiers of the Rust Belt Army quickly regrouped, and two of them lifted Hui and rushed outside. Hui struggled to turn back, and at the last moment he saw Yu Yan's lips move. Although there was no sound, he was certain he understood the word. Wait for me.